I'm Kara, and welcome to Soul Inspiring Business. I believe that all of us possess unique gifts and talents that allow us to serve the world and our own growth in the highest possible way. Our lives are an expression of our thoughts, beliefs, and actions. And here, we will explore businesses, thought leaders, and topics designed to inspire, helping propel your own growth so you can live your best and most purposeful life. Welcome to Soul Inspiring Business. Welcome back to the Soul Inspiring Business podcast. I'm your host, Kara, and I'm glad you're here. And today is a solo show, and we're going to start off with a story. Now, it may be a story that you've heard before, but I've found that it's one of those stories that just never gets old, and it's always a good reminder. So we're going to start with it. And it's the story of a father and his son and a watch. All right, so here it goes. Before he died, a father said to his son, "Here's a watch that your grandfather gave me. It's almost 200 years old. But before I give it to you, I want you to go to the jewelry store downtown and tell them that I want to sell it and see how much they offer you." So the son said, "Sure, I'll go to the jewelry store." So he goes down to the jewelry store, and they told him that they would give him $150 for it because it's too old. So the son comes back to his dad and he says, "Okay, well, they'll give $150. And so the father says, "Okay, well, why don't you go to the pawn shop and see how much they'll give you for it?" So the son goes to the pawn shop, and the pawn shop offered $10 because it looked too worn out and had a scratch on it. So the son comes back to the father and says, "Okay, well, they're willing to give $10. So obviously we should go with the jewelry store." And then the father says, "Well, why don't you take it down to the museum and show them the watch?" So the son goes to the museum and comes back and said to his dad, "Oh my gosh, you will absolutely never believe this. The curator offered me $500,000 for this really rare piece to be included in their precious antique collections because they said it was just such a rare and stunning watch." And so the father replied, and so he said, "Well, I can't believe it. Like, we're going to have $500,000." And the father said, "Well, in the end, I'm actually not going to sell it." And so the son was really confused because he's like, "Dad, why did you have me go through and get these different prices if you were never planning on selling it?" And so the father says to him, "Well, I wanted you to let you know that the right places value you in the right way. And so depending on somebody's own circumstances, not everybody is going to value you the same, right? And so don't find yourself in a place or the wrong place or get angry if you're not valued, but rather know your value, those who appreciate you, and don't stay in a place where people don't see that value." And I love this story, and it kind of ties into just really what I wanted to talk to you all about today in terms of knowing your worth, knowing your value. We've talked about this on the show before, but I think this story so beautifully illustrates that, you know, different people will value you in different ways. And it doesn't mean that your value has changed. It just means that their perception of you, that maybe they're not your right people if they're not valuing you in the right way, right? And so depending on where you are and your circumstances, you may be valued differently. So it's important to go to the places where you're valued, right? And I think it's important for a few different things as it relates to how we even show up in our businesses. Because, you know, it, for many of you listening who are either in the real estate world or have a business where people are, especially in the service industry, where people are valuing you against other service professionals. And if you don't believe in your own value, it's really hard to convince other people of it, right? And so I think that that's where being really clear on the value that you bring is really important, because if you don't see that value, they're not going to either. And also know that just because somebody doesn't value what you're willing to do doesn't mean that you're any less valuable, right? It just means that you may not be the right person for them. and they're not the right person for you, right? And I think this also comes into place when we talk about, setting pricing. This actually kind of just came up more recently for me, but one of the things that I always go back to was there was I used to teach this course called Ninja Selling. And if anybody that's listening has ever taken into these courses, it's this ninja selling is really kind of a relationship based selling system, I suppose, or modules. And one of the things that we were really taught was pricing and how people and perceived value, right? And so the interesting thing when we talk about pricing is that there are typically three types of people. There are people that will only ever want a discount. They just only want a discount and they will always go with the lowest price person. Then there's people that will always pay a premium. And these are people that just, for no matter what, they're always going to want to pay the highest price because they want to feel like they're getting something special, like they're getting that premium service. And then the rest of the people fall into a category where it states that, you know, people will pay more if they see associated value. And the interesting thing is the breakout of percentages of these types of people. And this was obviously studied by people way smarter than me, but it was 15% of people will always want a discount. It was 5% of people that will always pay a premium. And then it was 80% of people that will pay more if they see an associated perceived value with it. And when I think even about my own self, I will admit I love a discount. I love a deal. Um, and I'll typically always ask, just because that's my nature. I love um, to get a deal, so to speak. But that being said, I I may always ask, but I will also make the decision upon who I believe will actually has the best perceived value. And that may not be the person that offers the lowest price, right? And so I think that's really important to know, especially when we talk about this idea of value and the value that we have, because sometimes in a world like real estate or when if you're in a service oriented profession, it can be, if somebody asks for a discount, for example, you might be tempted to say, sure, yes. And not really dig deeper or not know that you're offering something that is more than another. And it kind of came up for me more recently because I had somebody that was kind of, I don't know, questioning something regarding our own pricing model. And I think whenever somebody does question that your pricing, it can kind of catch you off guard. But I think it's important to understand the value that you bring and why you've set it where you have, and to have an understanding for that, right? So not just to set your prices where you set them, but to say, this is why I'm setting it this way. This is actually how we operate differently than, in my case, the average agent. And this is how we're actually protecting and saving our clients money on the back end. And yada, 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 right? Like you get the point. So the idea is that, just because somebody asks for a discount doesn't mean that that they're going to make their decision on that, number one, but also to really um to know why you are worth what you're worth. And I think that's the piece that goes kind of with that as well, is this idea um of confidence that I think is a little different than energetic value, I would call it. Sometimes I think having confidence can come across as a little bit arrogant, but when all of you is very clear on the value that you bring and why, I think that people can feel that differently. It's a shift. It's coming to the table from a place of service with an authority of how can I help? How can I serve? Let me wrap my head around this and get the strategy in place and help you and all of that. And know that if somebody doesn't see the value, that doesn't mean that you're any less valuable. That just means that maybe their perception of value is different. And that's okay. They can go find somebody that is more aligned or correctly aligned with their perception of value. And you can still be in your lane and attract in the people that you're meant to serve, knowing that you don't have to be a one size fits all to everyone, right? It's, I think, unrealistic to think that in a world with so many different dynamics and so many different types of people that you're just going to magically be. And if you are, maybe you're like the biggest chameleon of them all. But, the idea is that you can help navigate and serve many different types of people, but that if somebody questions your value or questions your pricing or, you know, doesn't see the value in all that you're offering, then they're probably not your people. And I think we talked about this a little bit last time, which was this idea of soul aligned clients and what is that? And this came up on the retreat that I was at just a few weeks ago. And we were talking about this idea of a soul aligned client, the people that are most meant to find you. They're the people that not necessarily that you're like best friends and you're so alike in every way. That's not really a soul aligned client. The idea behind a soul aligned client is that it's just somebody that's super grateful for what you do, that's really filled with gratitude for what you're offering and appreciative of the work that you're putting in. That's really the idea behind a soul aligned client. And I think that's where, kind of backing into this in a different way, how do we show up full of value and knowing our own worth, knowing that, we different people are going to value us in different ways, and that doesn't take away from everything that we're doing, right? So that's the message. That's the short, quick little get you off into the day message. And I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. And if you've heard this story before, or if this is the first time you've heard it. But again, I love it because the truth is that you do have value. And then I think the onus is also on you to understand what is the value that I'm bringing and how do I articulate that in the best possible way. So, of course, have awareness of how you might be able to communicate the message better, about how you can communicate your value better. And that's just being a smart business person for, how you're going to do that. But also know that you don't have to be a one size fits all service, and that you can have a ton of great value and the right people will show up that see that. And those are the people that you want in your world and your space. And so with that, I wish you a beautiful week. And also, I was going to share too that if you are new to the show, would love to hear what you think. You can always find me on Instagram. I'm at Chaffin Donofrio. You can also find me, that's the best place to find me, but you can message me there. And then if this episode, or if, you love the podcast and there's certain episodes that you like or resonate with, I'd love it if you could share it with others. Rate, review, all of those things really just help me with getting the message out to more people and more people like you. So I appreciate that. All right. With that, have a blessed week and I'll see you next time. Loved being here with you today and would love to connect with you more over on Instagram. My handle is linked to the show notes, or you can just type in at Kara Chaffin Donofrio. And I have something special for you as a free gift, my Dynamic Life Journal. This special book has the power to really help you live a soul-inspired life. Go to freegiftfromkara.com. Easy to remember, freegiftfromkara.com. Until next time, beautiful people, sending all my love.